Welcome to the Hellenic News here on 3XY once again, and with us in the studio a very dear friend, a Member of Parliament, and a very active Member of Parliament for our community as well, our dear friend John Pantazopoulos. John, welcome to Melbourne, I should say. You've been a very busy man the last few months.
Good to be back on 3XY, Ross. Thank you.
It is most certainly, and great to have you, John. Well, firstly, if we could touch on and have a discussion, obviously you were overseas, Anzac Day with the parliamentary delegation, and just tell us about the experience and how did it go?
Well, we've been taking a mostly self-funded trip for the last 3 years. We've been taking Australian legislators to the sites of importance to the Anzacs in Greece. This year we also included Gallipoli to get a bit of a feel about Gallipoli and start working on a collaborative relationship with those that do Gallipoli tours to also get them thinking about doing Anzac tours in Greece, and including Lemnos at least with the 2015 centenary. But we also wanted the MPs to see a bit of the Greekness of that region. That it was Greek from ancient times, you know, that's modern-day Turkey now.
How many were in the delegation?
There were 22 people all up from around Australia, Federal Parliament, Western Australia, Victoria. So it was a broad group, and so we were away for 2.5 weeks. We started with Anzac events at Lemnos with the Australian ambassador there.
How was the event itself? Always capturing, always...
Look, you know, in recent years they've been doing events. I mean, I think it's the 13th year this year that they've been doing Anzac events in Lemnos, but only the second year that they've been doing it in April. They've been doing them.
Yes.
They've been doing them in May, which is not the right time to capture the opportunities with those going across to Gallipoli. So they've been doing it in April. They've agreed with us that that's the right time to do it. There's more opportunities and things to do. There's a growing interest in the Lemnos link to Gallipoli as we build up a centenary. But it was interesting to do a comparison of Gallipoli. Of course, it's a much bigger thing, but over there, the Department of Foreign Affairs in Turkey is the one that organises the events and then brings in the military brass and all the local officials. In Greece still, the biggest Anzac events are done in Crete, but even there, where is the better part of Greece, they're still done individually by municipalities and local authorities, and they put the programs out late, and which is really hard to build travel around, you know. I mean, so there is a discussion that we've started in Greece around whether Foreign Affairs or the Defence Department should be taking up organising these events with local authorities so that we have a longer build-up time. A more proactive role, you're saying? Correct, because you can put out a program many months ahead that allows people an opportunity to travel and be a part of those things. Not last minute. Well, you know, I mean... In most cases. Well, in many cases, yes, you know. I mean, we were up in the first battles in Greece in Vevi. They did a really nice event, but they had a bloke from the Defence Department speak, and I said, oh, it was a great speech, and he said, oh, you know, they only gave me 3 days' notice to do it, right? Yeah. We don't need that sort of thing, the risk of things going wrong, but it's also the short-termism of the getting through the moment rather than having a strategy ahead, saying, you know, months and months ahead, 6 months ahead we should be telling people, so that tour companies in Greece or individuals or Greek Australians that are there to know that there's something happening way in advance. But we took them around so that they got to see the Greekness of Constantinople and Gallipoli being a Greek word, and so we gave them to do those sort of things, do the contrast. We had Easter in Greece, so that they did the Epitaphio and how was that, and the Anastasia. Yeah, it was great. It was really good that they followed the Epitaphio around. We all issued candles. And where was this? In Athens. So, in Athens. So we did it. How was Athens, John? How did you find the? Oh, look, the weather was fantastic. That helps it immensely. It was like summer. It was like summer nights. But as you know, in Easter in Greece, most people go back to the village and the island, so there weren't a lot of people around. You know, there more people turned up for Easter in Dandenong than turned up at Plaka when we had it. But it was still really good for the Australians to be there and hold their karakia and, you know, walk around with the Epitaphio. Well, you talk about Plaka. There probably aren't many Greeks there. We gave them a choice. We went out for the East traditional breaking the fast, and half wanted to eat Margaritsa, which was really good, and they loved it. Yes. And they loved it. Well, I say it's much better than their tripe version, and I agree. So look, the objective of the trip is to get them to better understand Australia's heritage in Greece through the Anzac links. 80,000 Australians, soldiers, navy, nurses, doctors served in Greece in World War I and World War II.
Yes.
A huge sacrifice made by Australians. They were immensely supported by the Greeks in World War I, World War II. They write about that period of time. The Australians diggers write about the enthusiastic support and welcome that they have had from the Greeks, whether it's on Lemnos Island, whether it's in the Salonika front. Hundreds of Australians were up in Thessaloniki in World War I, which we've forgotten about, or whether it was in World War II all the way down to Crete. You know, they speak very fondly of the Greeks, the support, the village people, bringing them out fresh oranges and eggs as they march on, and
in most cases hiding them as well
as in conflict hiding them.
Yes.
So we wanted them to appreciate that the Australia-Greece story doesn't start when Greeks migrated to Australia, the mass migration of the 50s. It actually started before that. Then when we actually look at statistically, when we look at the census figures of Australia prior to the mass migration in the 1950s, there were less Greeks here than had been Australian soldiers in Greece. So we know 80,000 went World War I, World War II. So in other words, Australia's story with Greece begins with Australians in Greece, not with Greeks in Australia. Right? So we've got to flip that story around, and in many regards, we are here because the Australians were there, because the Australians saw that the Greeks were their allies, that they supported them, that they worked with them, that they hid them, that they fought with them. They write when they leave Greece being very sad about knowing the consequences of what will happen to the Greek population once they've departed. They write very strongly, emotionally about that, both in World War I, leaving Lemnos and Salonika, and in World War II. And so when the migration comes out, a lot of these people are public servants, they're senior people. A lot of them start sponsoring migrants from Greece. We know from the Laconians, the first Laconitas started coming out through Australians who had been hidden by Laconian families. And when we just look at our migration stream now, you know, why have we got all these Afghanis and Iraqis? Well, guess what? They're our allies. We're there. So definitely. Our migration story has often followed where we've been in conflict. Yes. So we are here because Australians were there. That's the story we wanted to give them. And so they see a bit of that. They get to experience the things that Australians did.
It's a shame that that story isn't promoted more and isn't more aware by people outside of Greece. You know, we're not doing quite...
Or even in Greece.
Or even in Greece itself.
All these things are in our hands. It's a different way of thinking. You know, I mean, one of the things that is very surprising to me, you know, you go to the military museums in Greece. They're all run by the Defence Department. All the serious ones. There's a few smaller independent ones in Crete that talk about the Battle of Crete and have, you know, some, you know, weapons from the Australians and the Brits and all that sort of stuff, and the Germans. But all the official war museums in Greece, sort of run by the Defence Department, end at 28 October. It's like the Greek army didn't continue fighting. They continued fighting. They continued fighting because they invited in the Allies, including the Australians, to the extent that they fought all the way down to Crete and evacuated with the Allies from Crete to fight in the Middle East together with Australians. You know, and Greek shipping was with Australian shipping in the Mediterranean.
So
you know,
the Greeks have let it on the 28th, and that's it.
Correct. The Greeks in Greece have forgotten that story. It stays a bit alive by local efforts in Crete and diplomatic stuff, and us Greeks here who haven't continued on the story because we also focus on 28 October, except it's the Cretans that keep us alive. You know, I mean, when we think that Australians had gone through 70% of Greece in World War I, World War II, what the Cretans have been doing, the Macedonians should be doing, the Messenians Peloponnesians should be doing, right? Because they started, you know, in World War I, 50,000 troops go to Lemnos, before they go to Gallipoli. That's where the supplies come from. They come back if they're injured. They come back for rest. When they're evacuated, they come there. Hundreds go to Salonika. About 400 nurses go to Salonika to support the Salonika front. World War II, we march them all the way up to Flodina, and they do this continuous, rearguard campaign, a fighting retreat, what's called, from northern Greece through central Greece, Elassona, Katerini, down through Larissa, Lamia, Bralos Pass, Thermopilas, Athens, Corinth.
All the way down, yes.
Nafplio, Monemvasia, Kalamata, yes, before they go to Crete. So there's a lesson in not only how to improve what the Cretans are doing to make it a bigger story, but what are we doing generally around the rest of Greece. This is the things that Australians sit there, the Australian politicians saying, oh, well, we've heard about the Battle of Crete stuff and the Cretans do stuff.
But
well, why don't the others do stuff? So it's an interesting paradigm, because I think that's why we do these things, because you get a different perspective from someone else. We're so embedded in the day-to-day things that we're used to, Mάχη, Κρήτη, we start organising around the Battle of Crete events, and we haven't thought about the broader picture. Sometimes it needs the outsider to tell us this. Sometimes we, as the Greek outsiders living in Australia, telling the Department of Defence in Greece, I thought the war continued after that and you had allies. Can we do stuff together? Can we involve the Australian War Memorial in discussion with the Defence Museums in Greece around having some Anzac exhibitions at the museum in Athens and at the other one, the big one in Thessaloniki? They've also got another one in Nafplio. Are these good things that help bring us closer together? Because the Australian and Greek story is something that's part of the joint heritage, and it starts with Australians in Greece. So that's why we took them. But we also went to a place called, because in the interwar years between World War I and World War II, the many Anzacs after Gallipoli returned and actually went to Constantinople. The Royal Australian Navy ships went up the Dardanelles. They were part of the peacekeeping mission. They were in Smyrni as part of the peacekeeping mission. They knew that the Greeks were enthusiastic supporters of the Gallipoli campaign, and to build the modern nation-state of Turkey, understandably, they turned against what they saw the enemy within, and the enemy within were Greeks and Christians, and which led to the Greco-Turkish War, which led to, we're commemorating Pontian and genocide soon, and it led to all these very difficult period, which we had 1.5 million Greek refugees from modern-day Turkey, and there were Anzacs that saw these things, and Anzacs that then got involved in fundraising from Australia, because the world's refugees at the time were Christian Greeks from modern-day Turkey. And one of those people that was appointed in the humanitarian effort was an Anzac called George Trelaw, who the Greek king at the time named a village outside of Komotini after him, Trilorio, which we also visited. Now, they're mainly a Pontian village.
Yes.
Trelaw from Ballarat relocated 140,000 Greeks from modern-day Turkey and built them into these new rural agrarian settlements. They were designed little communities, grid system like Melbourne is. And interestingly enough, we've got our soldier settlement schemes after the war. Very similar concept. It was
very similar, really.
Well, the resettlement concept for the refugees in agrarian communities was the same concept that we used in soldier resettlement schemes when the soldiers came back from the Great War. They went to country towns. We had to feed the population. We gave them a block to build their house and a block to work on for their farming land. So that's why you got a place called Lemnos, is a soldier settlement area outside of Shepparton. All these different places. The same principle was applied with the resettlement of those refugees, which increased Greece's population by a third. So they had to be farming communities to feed the masses. And people like Trelaw were there for 8 years, League of Nations Commissioner for Refugees before the UN, from 1923 to 28 in Komotini and Thessaloniki.
Can I ask you, have you seen over the year, you've been now to Anzac and to Gallipoli quite a few times, have you seen any changes over the past few years? Like, obviously more people are being aware, more people are visiting. Do you see the facilities or the
in Anzac Cove.
In Anzac Cove and also in Lemnos and so on. Do you see any? Is it progressing? Is it?
Look, and there's a thing happening in Australia which we're going to start seeing, and we're seeing already, but it'll build up even more. It'll be more apparent as we build up the centenary of Gallipoli in 2015.
Which is in 15. That's okay. Right.
But let's not forget, it's also a centenary of Anzac, because that's when Anzac started. And Anzac was reformed in Greece, in the northern, outside of Florina, in World War II. That's the first time the Anzacs were reformed again. So this will be a 5-year commemorative events, which will include the Battle of Greece and Crete. So we need to organise ourselves in 2016. It will be the 75th anniversary. So the centenary of Gallipoli is to provide its opportunities to do 75th anniversary of the Battle of Greece and Crete. But there's a transformation occurring in Australian society that in many regards, Anzac Day is becoming the more important of the national days that Australians are having.
Yes.
Certainly amongst young Australians.
Well, we saw what happened this year. I mean, it was just phenomenal.
So you're seeing this trend internationally that Greece needs to organise itself to be a part of, because Australians are good travellers. We know that with the Greek tourist data, the Australians, not the biggest number of tourists, but they're the highest spending tourists. So if you want quality tourists, you go for Australians. And New Zealand is similar.
Well, with our dollar as well being so strong and so.
But irrespective, they're they're high spenders because they spend.
And there's a lot of connections here in Australia with Europe in general, really.
Correct. And because the Australians are travellers, because they want to go and pay respects where the Australians serve, 100,000 go to Turkey every year. 100,000 Australians go to Greece every year. Right? 100,000 go to see one spot called Gallipoli.
Yeah.
Hardly any of those go over to Greece. There's a massive opportunity for Greece to align itself with the opportunities.
Well, that's where I was heading.
In Turkey,
is Greece identifying? Because one of the things
not yet. They're slow. Well,
this is where it's a bit frustrating, because here we are. We've got an economic situation in Greece, and these are growth areas of thought, because tourism is such a major.
So what we're doing is that we're spending, mostly our own money. It costs me to go to places that I've been to innumerable amounts of time, but we do that to make an impression on the local authorities, to get them to understand the opportunities that are available to them. The opportunity on the historic cultural link between Australia and Greece through the Anzac effort and through being allies and through migration. And then secondly, also the economic opportunities that are available to them to capture these.
Exactly.
Because this is the way that, as there are no more diggers from Gallipoli, Alistair Campbell was the last that passed away a couple of years ago. It lives on in a new memory of what it is. So that's why, for good or bad, there's a ballot for 2015 to get to Anzac Cove, because demand will outstrip supply.
It will be.
And the only fair thing to do is to have a ballot. But a lot of the work that's going on in Turkey, and what we're trying to do is Greece to engage, is saying, well, where would the spillover go? And the spillover should also go to other parts of Turkey before Anzac Day, after Anzac Day, but also Lemnos.
Yes, definitely.
We are working with tour operators about including Lemnos. One of them, the biggest from Australia, it's based out in Melbourne, is actually sending their cruise ship to Lemnos in 2015, which will be a fantastic experience.
Great.
There's stuff that is being planned on the island for 2015. The imaging that we're working on is that Lemnos was the friendly island. It's where young blokes can go and muck around with their mates before they go to battle, or when they're recovering in that Aussie larrikinism. They've gone, Aussies have gone leave passes, unauthorised leave, finding little tavernas, drinking stuff that they find out later on is called ouzo or tsipuro or retsina.
Great memories.
Eating their first feta cheese.
Yes.
Playing soccer games, playing football games, playing cricket. Maybe Lemnos can be the place to have some of these commemorative type of friendly activities, which highlights the haven role that the island was seen as by the Australians at the time. Because they couldn't do that sort of stuff in Gallipoli is a very tight peninsula, and quite large hills and steep escarpments. you couldn't do those sort of things. That's why then in the trenches at Gallipoli, they spent a lot longer in the trenches at Gallipoli than they did in the Western Front, because it was so hard to bring troops in and so hard to take them out. They did take them out, but that rest time was at Lemnos. So we're trying to highlight the opportunities that are available to capture some of these economic opportunities that also then become stronger social opportunities and cultural opportunities that will be long-lasting.
Exactly, that can build for the future. John, that's fantastic. Look, we'll take a short break. I'd like to talk to you about your role also with Haki. We've got some great news there as well. So we'll take a short break here on the Hellenic News in Brief, and we'll be back shortly with our very special guest, John Pantazopoulos.